News when you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Amy Morris. And there's your closing bell for this Thursday on Wall Street, where investors are betting that the Fed will cut interest rates sooner than expected. And we do bring you the closing numbers each day here at Bloomberg. The S&P 500 gained 109 points. NASDAQ up 458 points. The Dow is up 486 points. The 10-year Treasury yield at 4.31%. The 2-year yield at 3.79%. Alphabet reported profit and earnings per share for the first quarter, beating the average analyst estimates. Shares of Alphabet nearly 5% higher in the post-market. Intel gave a weak forecast for the current period, announcing that it is cutting workers to bring costs in line with the business's smaller size. Shares of Intel down now more than 4.5% in the post-market. President Trump is hopeful about a peace deal between Russia and Ukraine. He says both sides need to make concessions, but when it comes to Crimea,
they made a decision. There wasn't a bullet fired. There was no fighting. There was no anything. They just handed it over. Now they say, well, can you get it back? I think that's going to be a very difficult thing to do.
Bloomberg News has learned the U.S. will demand Russia accept Ukraine's right to a defense industry as part of a peace deal. Bloomberg's Kailey Leinz.
And our understanding is this is going to be presented as an issue when Steve Witkoff, the U.S. Special Envoy, meets with Vladimir Putin next in Moscow, which is expected to happen tomorrow.
Bloomberg's Kailey Leinz. Bloomberg national security editor Nick Wadhams says that's not all.
We know energy has been very important to President Trump, so the Zaporizhzhia power plant, a massive power plant in Ukraine that Russia seized during the war, the U.S. is essentially saying you got to give it back.
Bloomberg's Nick Wadhams. And the U.S. and South Korea could reach an agreement of understanding on trade very soon. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent in the Oval Office.
We will be talking technical terms as early as next week, as we reach an agreement on understanding as soon as next week. So South Koreans came early. They came with their A game, and we will see if they follow through on that.
Bessent did not elaborate on what would be included in a so-called agreement of understanding with Seoul, South Korea. Trade tensions between the U.S. and China remain high. China denying any talks are ongoing, but President Trump says, yes, they are.
Well, they had a meeting this morning, so I can't tell you. It doesn't matter who they is. We may reveal it later, but they had meetings this morning, and we've been meeting with China.
And the European Union is making its case for a trade deal with the U.S. Eurogroup President Pascal Donohoe.
And what we want to do within the European Union is move that into a negotiation that we hope can take place across the coming weeks and months that can lead to a mutually beneficial outcome for both sides of the Atlantic and avoid the very uncertainty and risks really gathering steam and hurting jobs and growth for all of us.
Eurogroup President Pascal Donohoe was a guest on Bloomberg Surveillance in Washington. Cleveland Fed President Beth Hammack ruled out a May interest rate cut, but tells CNBC the central bank could move as early as June if it has clear evidence of the economy's direction.
I think we'll be watching the data carefully, and I enter every meeting with an open mind about whether it's a time that we should be continuing to be patient or a time that we should take action. And so if we have clear and convincing data by June, then I think you'll see the committee move if we know which way is the right way to move at that point in time.
Cleveland Fed President Beth Hammack. Fed Governor Christopher Waller doesn't think tariffs will have a significant impact on the economy before July. But at that point, he says unemployment could rise quickly if high tariffs are in place.
It wouldn't surprise me that you might start seeing more layoffs, a tick up in the unemployment rate going forward if the big tariffs in particular come back on. But if I see a significant drop in the labor market, then the employment side of the mandate I think is important, and we step in.
Waller says he'd support rate cuts in that scenario to protect the labor market. Harvard University's endowment is in advanced talks to sell around $1 billion of private equity fund stakes to Lexington Partners. The sale is happening amid financial uncertainty and pressure from Trump administration threats. Harvard's endowment had allocated almost 40% of its $53 billion to private equity. The Commodity Futures Trading Commission is looking into the uses and risks of around-the-clock trading, notably in crypto, to determine what regulations might be needed. Chairwoman Carolyn Pham.
While that presents a lot of opportunities and there's a lot of benefits, particularly when you have an asset class that is liquid enough to support continuous trading or extended trading hours, we also have to make sure that we are prepared from an operational perspective, because with the recent market volatility, it's absolutely incumbent upon us as regulators to make sure that the markets are functioning well.
CFTC Acting Chair Caroline Pham says U.S. Treasuries continue to be a safe haven, so she's confident markets are safe and sound. A judge has blocked parts of Donald Trump's election executive order, including a proof of citizenship mandate for voter registration. Another judge put a temporary halt to the White House's push to end diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts in K-12 public schools. In a separate case, a judge has also barred the Trump administration from denying or conditioning the use of federal funds to so-called sanctuary cities. Meanwhile, the Trump administration is asking the Supreme Court to allow a new ban on transgender service members to take effect. That's news when you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Amy Morris. This is Bloomberg.